College football fans, we are a hardy, perseverant, long-suffering, patient bunch. What we sat through tonight, what was that worth? What was that worth to you? Was that worth 8 hours? Hopefully now we can make the next couple hours worth it to all of you as we talk up the two semifinal games and look forward to the national championship game, the much anticipated and expected national championship game. Rewind the clock. Let's go back to my video in August, Alabama-Georgia national championship game. Welcome into the voice of college football. And yes, I was tempted many times to keep my TV on the sci-fi 24-hour Twilight Zone marathon. I was tempted, but I am obligated to you. I am obligated as the voice of college football to watch everything and all that is college football, and especially on this night. We wait how long for this, and we got that. Congratulations to Alabama. Congratulations to Georgia, because they were truly the two best teams in the country on this night, and probably last night, and would be next week on Thursday, and 3 months ago on Tuesday. And yes, the two best teams in college football do hail from the same conference. They do. Mercifully, the final gun has just sounded at the Orange Bowl, Hard Rock Stadium. It actually is. They still call the game the Orange Bowl. Why? I don't know. It's a college football playoff, and it's played at another stadium that's not the Orange Bowl. But one of the absurdities of college football, just one of the few, and one of the many, actually, but one of the less important ones. The final score will read Georgia 34, Michigan 11. The real final score will read Georgia butt-kicking, just browbeating, slap over the head, time after time after time, kick you in the teeth, twist your arm behind you, throw you on the ground, heel, boot, in the neck, no mercy. Well, actually, there was mercy in this one. It could have been much worse. Georgia wins 34-11. The final score will only be logged up here for the purposes that I remember these scores. Otherwise, again, the score was inconsequential. It was 27-3 at halftime. It was over. Michigan had a couple shots to make it 27-10. They did move the football there in the third quarter a number of times, but when they got to the red zone, the men stood up. The men came to play. The big dogs from Georgia came to play, and they shut down the Michigan offense time and time again in the red zone. And I know that they wanted to pitch a touchdown shutout, but Michigan scored a late touchdown. I don't know how I feel, to be completely honest with you. I was setting up here, so I don't even know who scored the touchdown for Michigan. Was that Antrell Anthony that scored the touchdown? And I believe also the 2-point conversion for Michigan. I can find it right here. Yeah, it was Antrell Anthony. He celebrated. He motioned to the crowd. You know, on one hand, the ornery old man side of me, get off my lawn side of me wants to say, you know what? You're losing 34-3, now 34-9. What are you celebrating, you knucklehead? On the other hand, he's a kid. He's exuberant. He's playing in the Orange Bowl. He's playing in a college football playoff game. He just scored a touchdown. He did something that 99.999999999% of the people on the planet will never do. He can't help that it's 34-9. He can't change the score. He's celebrating. And, you know, when he held his hands up toward the crowd, I thought, All these Michigan fans came to see their team play, to support their team. They showed up in droves. According to what I could see and hear, it appeared as though about 60+% of the crowd was Michigan. And so they came out, they supported, they've been waiting for this for a long, long time, even prior to 2014 in the college football playoff era. And they finally scored a touchdown. So, you know what? Why not celebrate the moment? Okay, that's inconsequential to what happened on the field that was meaningful toward a final result, which was, again, just flat out Georgia butt kicking Michigan. Forget the final score. Georgia wins it. Stetson Bennett, I have tried to be fair and, of course, accurate. That's always my aim here concerning all players and teams and coaches. But concerning Stetson Bennett and the ridicule that he has suffered this entire season, and then going back to last season, and everybody trying to replace him, I have certainly been critical of where I felt as though he deserved or had earned some criticism, basically turning the ball over. That's the one criticism I've had of Stetson Bennett, is not the amount of turnovers, but the ill-timed turnovers. The throws that he thinks he can make that we saw John Elway make 40 years ago and Brett Favre make 20 years ago. Other than that, I've applauded Stetson Bennett being Mr. Three-Star, Mr. Walk-On, that finally earned the scholarship. They talked about his story late in the broadcast, so I won't repeat it here. But you got to root for the guy. The guy's an athlete. And it's so funny because we have such a skewed viewpoint of athleticism that if you're not 6'4" and chiseled, you're not an athlete. Stetson Bennett is a better athlete than everybody listening to me right now, myself at my very peak, all of us put together. Stetson Bennett, like they said during the broadcast, he was Mr. Baseball in the state of Georgia. He ran track to the extent in which he did not defeat Mecole Hardman, but raced against Mecole Hardman. This dude is, he's an elite athlete. Maybe not on the world stage, an elite athlete, but for guys walking up and down the street, he's an elite athlete. All right, we will take your calls. Of course, we will get to your comments and your questions there in the live chat. It was not the most of scintillating nights for college football to be displayed to America on New Year's Eve. In this day and age of the pandemic now that we are suffering through for a second consecutive New Year's Eve, that probably helps the ratings for the college football playoff with more people staying home. But at the same time, this is not a good clash for college football to say, hey, we're going to take on New Year's Eve. That was a decision that was made in the second college football playoff in 2015, and the ratings went going up against New Year's Eve. And the second game, which is typically the better of the two games, supposed to be, that's the way they scheduled them. If you haven't caught on to that, they schedule what they expect to be the lesser of the two games first and the better of the two games second. It has turned out most seasons that they've both been clunkers. And this is not a way to present college football to the nation. This is the exciting product that we give you. So you shouldn't just wait until the end of December to watch college football. You should be watching this the entire season. Well, actually, everybody in America should be watching it during the regular season because that's when it's the most fun, exciting, and competitive. But then we get this. Oh, my goodness. All right. Is anybody on the line before we get to some phone calls here at the Voice of College Football? I want to remind everyone that if you are thinking about starting a business, you've started a business, you've got a small business, and you don't know what the heck to do about credit, financing, because your personal credit is not good, don't worry about that. It's not going to be checked. It doesn't matter. Your personal credit, put that aside. Our guy, Josh Van Horn, will hook you up with thousands of possibilities of business lines of credit. Just check out his work at Get Business Credit right here on YouTube. Caller number 1 here at the Voice of College Football, kicking things off. Welcome.
Hey, Mark, how's it going? This is Sean.
Hey, Sean. What you got for us?
Initially thinking your voice would be the first one I heard in 2022, but I will off itself for probably being the last in 2021. So, Happy New Year's in advance.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Sean. I appreciate that so much. I've lost track of the time, actually. 11:09. Okay, here on the East Coast. All right.
Yeah, the ball is still hanging about 50 feet in the air, right, for a little while, but. I'm so glad that last point you mentioned was going to be like one of the first thing I talked about. I don't understand the marketing, how they set up the playoffs, the scheduling for these games. It drives me nuts to have these games on New Year's Eve here, and I mean, like a few years ago, they had it on December 29th. I remember they actually had the playoff games before, kind of before all the bowl games that are like relevant. It was like all the group of 5 bowl games, then the playoff, and then no one cared about the rest of the bowl games afterwards.
Yes.
I think it does a disservice to the people playing in the games tomorrow. I mean, there's just a natural lull in interest in those games, and I think it's bad. I think it's bad marketing. It's bad for the ratings. So I'll leave that at that. First off, my Bearcats. What an effort today. What an effort the last few seasons. I knew they were overmatched. Today wasn't the best outcome I was realistically hoping for, but it was very, very far from the worst. And I don't know. I thought they represented themselves extremely well. It was a reasonably competitive game most of the way through, and they're just not as good, so they didn't win today, and they blew a few opportunities. Nothing significant, but I'm just very, very. It was just a great time to be a Bearcats fan. They acquitted themselves as well as I think almost any other team that you could have substituted for them in that spot probably would have performed. Do you agree?
So I think that's a fair comment. I had a couple buddies text me during the game in the second half and basically say, they're not college football junkies, but one of them more so than the other watches college football. He's an Ohio State fan.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one watches the Ohio State games, and they're not college football guys, but more NFL guys. But they were like, why is Cincinnati in this game? Could we not have come up with somebody better to play in this game? This game's a blowout. This is boring. And I came back to say, well, basically, I said, from an athletic standpoint, yes, Alabama's obviously the much better team. But from an athletic standpoint, this is not an embarrassment. We have had and seen far more embarrassing performances in the playoff than this. We've seen a few.
We saw one directly after that. I would say Cincinnati.
Yeah, I guess. So anyway,
I would say Cincinnati was. It's picking this, but I would judge Cincinnati's performance as more respectable than Michigan's.
Yeah. Yeah, I generally would too. I think Alabama did play the game in a certain way. I likened it to the way Alabama played Notre Dame last year, in which they played very conservatively, and they might have been able to just throttle Notre Dame, but they did not. They didn't choose to. They came out and ran the ball, 12 or 13 consecutive times. So anyway, to bypass all that, I basically stated that from an athletic standpoint, obviously, Cincinnati was outclassed, but they didn't embarrass themselves. It was a 10-3 game late in the first half. it was still
Mm-hmm.
in no way did I ever, from the time Alabama ran like 3 plays, did I feel that they were threatened. I never felt as though, but I went into the game with a certain perception that Alabama was going to win by 25 points. So I needed to see something out of Cincinnati to think otherwise. But I thought in terms of just running to the football, tackling, hitting, that it was not a mismatch, that they were competitive from an athletic standpoint. And so, no, it wasn't competitive on the scoreboard in regards to being a game in which people were on the edge of their seats. We didn't get that kind of game. But if you just were watching football and evaluating the teams to say, okay, do these teams belong in the same field? I absolutely think so. I think that Cincinnati acquitted itself athletically and from a physical standpoint. They just couldn't get anything going offensively because Alabama was too darn tough against the run and made life miserable on Desmond Ritter. But I don't know. From a talent standpoint, the obvious from a talent standpoint, the obvious answer to who could have played a better game in this 4 would have been Ohio State. I think anybody you ask out there, that would be, but I don't know that that's because it's more than just a talent equation. And Ohio State got pushed around by Michigan, so they certainly didn't earn a playoff spot by any stretch of the imagination. Could they have played better? Possibly, but we'll never know. And Cincinnati, again, a 21-point loss to Alabama has certainly not been an embarrassment in this playoff era.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, I think the one point that I was really concerned about coming into the game, and it really revealed itself as legitimate grounds for concern, was just the offensive line play for Cincinnati. They are sort of, even like by American Conference standards, they're probably maybe slightly above average on the O-line. But I mean, by college football playoff standards, they just stand no chance. And I mean, and Ritter had no time to throw. And I mean, I really think with better O-line play, or possibly with a better scheme, the receivers for Cincinnati could have made some plays, but he just had no chance for most of the game. And that's I mean, they actually kind of ran the ball pretty well today. I think that Ford averaged 6 yards a carry today. I mean, they were consistently getting some yards when they tried to run, but just couldn't protect at all. And it was, I mean, like, when you're a program like Cincinnati, when you're a fan of something like this, I mean, you can't. I don't know. I mean, I am glad that they got the chance to at least show up. I mean, I think showing up and being involved in this is more significant than if they would have beat Baylor in the Sugar Bowl or something like that. They can forever say, I mean, at least right now, how many programs have made the college football playoff? Like 11? Something like that? 11, 12? They're one of them.
Yeah.
And so that's fantastic. Thanks for the call, Mark. I appreciate everything you do here, and I look forward to your 2022 content coming out pretty soon.
Thank you, Sean.
Probably January, like 15th.
Oh, we're going to get after it. Yep. A lot to talk about. Thanks for the call,
awesome.
Sean.
Take care. Happy New Year, Mark.
Congratulations on your team. And despite the loss tonight, it was a phenomenal year for Cincinnati football. No question about that. And yes, they did not.
Phenomenal 3-4 year stretch.
Absolutely.
These guys, I just want to say one last thing is, like, this group has just, I mean, it takes a group kind of like this, I think, that really grew up together. I mean, most of these guys have been playing since 2018. And one of the most understated, remarkable stats I might have ever heard in today's era of college football, Ahmad Gardner has been starting corner for 4 years. And he never gave him a touchdown. He had 0 touchdowns thrown against him in 4 years. I don't even know how that's possible.
Yeah,
in today's day.
It is crazy.
All right.
Sean, thank you so much.
Mark.
Happy New Year.
Take care. Happy New Year.
All right. Before I take this next call, let me catch up on the live chat and make sure, because I think we've got a couple super chats coming in and I don't want to miss those. DeAndre, good to see you, man. Thank you so much for that contribution. Means so much. BGPO football funk, Bama, Georgia next week. DeAndre, I believe, still has a YouTube channel, BGPO football funk. You can look it up right here on YouTube, talking college football and some NFL. And do we have any others? I thought we did. Yes, we do. Let's catch up with Sue. Hey, Sue. Thank you so much for that contribution, Sue. Good to see you. Is the fact that most of the semis are blowouts an indictment on how the playoff committee chooses the Final Four? Seems they must be getting it wrong. Well, I don't think they're getting it wrong necessarily. I think that most seasons that there is an argument for another team to be included or take the place of team number 4. That's pretty much what we've had every season, except one where there was a debate over who should be number 4 and if there should be another team in there in place of number 4. But it's not like that they're coming out with some kind of crazy 4 teams that nobody else would select. So even though I don't believe in the format, I don't believe in giving that kind of power and authority to 13 people that completely control college football by selecting the 4 teams. They haven't selected some crazy odd 4 teams. So the 4 teams that they've selected have been very close to what I would have selected or what any other selection process would have brought us. It's the elimination of conference play that bothers me. We just played a college football season. We've got 10 conferences. And if you look at it that way, only 3 of the 10 were represented. We've got 5 major conferences, and only 2 of 5 major conferences were represented in the playoff. So that's just one of the issues that I have. We've got Dwayne. Dwayne, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. You've got to be excited about Dan Lanning. We saw him on the sideline coaching up that Georgia defense. Now he probably, boom, jumped on the plane, probably celebrated for like 10 or 15 minutes, jumped on a plane, headed back to Oregon, and he's going to be out recruiting tomorrow. He's going to say, did you see what I did? Did you see what we did? Did you see the Georgia defense last night? That's what we're bringing to Eugene, Oregon. He's going to be selling that tomorrow on the recruiting path. He's going to be in people's homes tomorrow. Always enjoy your shows, Mark. Looking forward to many more in the future. Thank you so much, Dwayne. Appreciate that. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Oh, it's Chris, and I don't want to take much of your time, Mark, because you gave me so much time last night.
That's all right, Chris. Thanks for calling.
Well, no, I don't want to take your time. It's not fair to anybody else, so I'm just going to quickly just tell you, I think it was Darrell MVP was kind of curious about where the conferences stacked up against each other. And the top 5 are all the P5, and then, of course, the bottom 5 would be the G5. So there is a division between the two, and it's a fairly clear division, actually. I included Connecticut with the American because they only had 11. I just did it. Maybe I shouldn't have. But when I included Connecticut with the American, it dropped their average down to about 40. And it elevated the Mountain West to about 42, which means the Mountain West actually might have if I include Connecticut, if I don't include Connecticut, that changes it, right? But, so if I included Connecticut because they were kind of off by themselves and they're not a very good team. But anyway, that elevated the Mountain West above the American. So actually, American is a G5. It's not it shouldn't be confused with a P5 because they're just not that good. Maybe you already knew that, but and it's possible too that the way I do it isn't, I don't want to be like, oh, I know everything about it. I don't, but I'm doing it the only way I know how to do it, and the only way I know how to do it kind of gives us an even split. And so So there's probably a good reason why there's a different, I don't think it's just somebody decided to throw the American in the G5. I think that's where they belong. And you said something about the Pac-10 and Pac-12. They're not that much worse than there's a 5%, I guess, differential between the very good P5 and then you have where the Pac-12 fits in. They're underperforming, but not to such a degree that they should be like, they're not that far off really from the norm. 55, I'm about 55% compared to 60% being about where they should be. So yeah, they're definitely underperforming, Mark, but they're not like, you kind of paint them as being like really bad and I don't know if that's really fair to them because unless I'm doing it incorrectly, which I guess is a possibility, I think they're actually a pretty relatively good P5 conference, at least by the way I calculate it, which like I said, you might not agree with the way I do it, and then the other thing I was going to tell you, there's a 60-40 split between the P5 and the G5. And that's actually a fairly significant, it doesn't sound like much, right? It's like 60-40, but that's actually a fairly significant split. It's like, unless I'm doing it wrong, I think that says that, it's a full measure of degree of separation, which that's fairly substantial, really. So I just thought I'd share that information with you and you can use it however you want. I've already posted it on one of your, so you can look at it if you want and see what you think. But that's about all I had to tell you, and I don't want to waste any more time with it. So.
Well, I appreciate that.
So have a good night.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. The only thing I'll say about
I'm not trying to. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing I'll state about the conference is because we just had these two semifinal games, and I think that's what people want to talk about. So we've got plenty of time to break down the conferences, and of course there are going to be games tomorrow and another game coming up in a couple nights. So those are going to be included in your rankings, correct? You'll have to add those results. Sure. Okay.
Well, no. Can I just tell you one thing?
Sure.
I'm going to use a different. This won't make sense to you, Mark, because I don't think you really understand what I'm doing. And it's not to say that you wouldn't understand it, but it's like that's where there's like between you and me, there's like kind of a bridge that we need to cross because what I'm doing actually is I'm not really ranking anybody. That's really not what I do. What I do is I take information that's gleaned from another place, team rankings, and if they're doing it wrong, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I'm using their information and I'm using what I think is the right method to get the right result. And so if they're wrong, I'm wrong. That's just that simple. Or it doesn't mean that I'm like smarter than they are because I'm not. But if they're wrong, I'm wrong. And so what I'm going to do for the last one, I'm going to use a different one. I'm going to use the sports reference one, which I like better anyway. And that should give us a better idea of whether or not I'm doing it properly or not. And like I said, these are all based on team rankings, which is a different website that it's one kind of closer to the Football Power Index, which is what I was hoping would use to give us a good idea about who should go, which assuming I did it correctly, who I thought should go, like I already told you, was Alabama and Georgia. Kind of makes me sound like I'm smart, right? Because it is, but it's just the way it worked out. It's not because I really gave any thought to who would go, but so really what we have is we have a championship between the two teams that I thought would be there, is what it is basically. And then what I'm going to do after the season's over is I'll take all those same things that I was using before, but I'm going to use sports references. They have an independent one, and that should give us a better idea of how they finish. So I'll publish another one after the season's over that should give us a better idea of what I think is the right. Like I say, what I think doesn't really matter, but yeah, we have a 60-40 split, which means that that's actually a fairly significant split. It doesn't sound like much, right? But it is. It says that the G5 is, substantially better than the G5 just in general. That's why people shouldn't be disappointed about Cincinnati losing. The fact they're even there is kind of a miracle because there's such a big difference between G5 and P5 football. 2-1 is what it is. But anyway, I don't want to waste any more of your time, Mark, because you give me so much time. But I just hope you have a happy new year and best of luck with your broadcast. They do a really good job. So.
Happy New Year, Chris. Well, thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you for providing those analytics. I will say a couple things when we get off the phone before I move on to another call, and then you can call back, and we can certainly discuss this further in the off season. Thank you, Chris. Happy New Year.
You too, Mark. Bye.
So basically what I would say was if you're relying on another database for statistics, that all depends on who you're relying on. So, for example, if I was going to build a system and I was going to rely on statistics from somewhere else, well, I would verify that those statistics are correct. So if they're just basic statistic like rushing yards per game, points per game, points against per game, then you can go to a number of sites and you know that those are accurate. You don't have to check those statistics. You can go to ESPN and you know that it's showing that Georgia has the number one rushing defense in America, and those teams are 2 through 130, and you can trust those statistics. At the same time, though, if I'm relying on somebody else, another platform for interpretive analytics, meaning they are taking statistics and then they are putting them through their own filters and manipulating those statistics for certain results and outcomes, then I would start to question that, and I would have to know exactly what I'm dealing with, what I'm looking at. That's the only thing I would say about that, Chris, if that makes sense. Point number 2 about the Pac-12 would be that the Pac-12 is atrocious. It just is. We can look at every team in the Pac-12, and their performance out of conference has been poor. The entire conference's performance has been decidedly worse than the other 4 conferences outside the conference. Oregon beat Ohio State. We can applaud that. That's exceptional. Great. They beat one of the most likely 5 best teams in the country. Okay. Other than that, that's it for the entire conference. The other results outside the conference for the Pac-12 in non-conference play have either been reasonable wins, expected wins, should be wins against bad Power 5 teams or Group of 5 teams, or they have been utter disappointments and losing to teams that should not be beating Power 5 teams. Case in point today, Washington State loses a bowl game to Central Michigan. UCLA lost to Fresno State. Fresno State's a good team, sure, but they are the 2nd, 3rd, 4th best team in the Mountain West Conference. UCLA should not be losing that game. BYU defeated 5 teams in the Pac-12. BYU at the same time lost to UAB. So BYU is a good football team. They're a good football team. Where would they finish in the Big Ten? 6th, 7th? So we could go team by team in the Pac-12, and the results are dismal. Dismal. Utah's a good team. They're a good team. They shouldn't win a conference championship. They are not at a conference championship level of some other conferences. So I'm going to stop browbeating the Pac-12, but it's obvious that the results are abysmal this year, and the conference has a long way to go. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is One Scoop John. Happy New Year.
One Scoop John, Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, there were a couple of people in the chat who said, where are the Michigan fans? You know, they were here when Ohio State lost. You know, where are the Michigan fans? Well, here's the Michigan fans.
Well, not your night, that's for sure.
You know, and that happens. But so I have a couple of points. My first being congratulations to the University of Georgia for an incredible performance tonight. It's going to be, obviously, I think the national championship game is going to be, really interesting to see how Georgia really changes their decision making from the SEC championship. But you know what? Congratulations on beating us. They were the better team tonight. That's number one, right? So number two is, I think you remember when we were talking in September and October, and I was talking about, we might need to move off of Harbaugh. We might need to go to a different coach. We may be in deep, with our program. I don't think a living soul in the world, other than maybe Harbaugh himself and the team, thought that they were going to go 11-1, 12-1, really, beat Ohio State, and win the Big Ten. That has to be said. I think that they were positioning themselves for, I'd say, a ceiling of maybe you get to the playoff. Would you agree with that?
Would I agree that? Restate that again?
Would you agree that the goals, I mean, ideally, yay, national championship would be amazing, but beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten were probably the key goals of the season.
Oh, sure. This season was a
right.
over-the-top success for Michigan football. Absolutely. An enormous success.
I'm happy. Yeah. And I'm happy that we came. We're here too.
And to me, there's no reason to really have a goal of, let's say, a national championship or a stated goal. You need to be able to understand the format, the playoff format, and how your sport is structured, because you cannot achieve certain goals without achieving other goals. Therefore, if you're a team in the Big Ten, win the Big Ten. Win the Big Ten, and 9 out of 10 times that playoff spot will take care of itself.
Right. And that's 100% what happened. And so, I'm very happy with Harbaugh and the team for getting to that point. That was really the key goal of the season. Now, when you look at the playoff and you look at the overall structure, I think you see that the top of the SEC may be just a little bit better in 5-star talent than the top of the Big Ten. Now, Ohio State, I'd say, would be the exception.
Whoa. I would restate that. You stated it as the SEC in 5-star talent at the top of the SEC is just slightly better than the top of the Big Ten, and then Ohio State's the exception.
I would say more than slightly.
Okay. I would state that the SEC crushes the Big Ten in 5-star talent.
Yeah.
And Ohio State's the exception. Yeah. Ohio State, I just looked at the numbers the other day. If you're looking at the current rosters, Georgia has 19 5-stars. Ohio State has 16. Alabama has 14. Michigan has 3? Yes.
Possibly 3, yeah. Yeah.
And that's not everything. That's not all there is to it.
No.
Of course. It's one indicator.
It's an indicator, and I think that's there's the one school of thought, right, where, listen, we did earn our spot here, yeah. On the other hand, if we want to compete, if we have to make a fundamental decision, and this is kind of my key point, is that we have to make a fundamental decision as a program. It's who we are. Are we a team that's going to contend for a national championship, or are we a team that our goal is to beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, which has historically been our goal, right? If you look at the 90s, you look at the 2000s, you look at the last 3 or 4 decades, the goal has been to win the Big Ten. I'd say more often than not, right? And that's been who we are. So if you want to contend for national championship, I think the first thing that we needed to do was beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, which we did. Right? I think that will help recruiting the next 1 or 2 years. But then how do you get to the next echelon? Right? How do you get to an Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State? If that's even something that we want to do, right? We have to have a decision as a program. Like, do we want to be contending for titles or not? And so that's really, I think, a fundamental conversation that needs to be had with the AD, with the president of the university, if that's something we want to do, right? Bringing in Harbaugh indicated that's something we wanted to do. This is the coach that went to the Super Bowl, right? This is the coach that was that did very well in the NFL, right? So that indicated to me, at least, that's where we wanted to be as a program, right? So that's kind of where I think we just need to do some soul searching as a program. But from the game itself, I mean, Stetson Bennett redeemed himself today if he had any redemption to even do, because over 300 yards passing, that's incredible. He did a great job tonight. And I think we saw the future of Michigan. J.J. McCarthy had more passing yards than Cade McNamara tonight. J.J. had 131. Cade had, I think, 117, something like that. So we at least, I think, see the future of the program. It's possible. JJ is a great talent. It's just a question of now, what do we want to do as a program? I think that's where we're at.
Well, I would agree with that assessment. It is so difficult to compete at that level. 90% of the schools out there can't even begin, even if they committed themselves to it, could not accomplish it. So there's a small category of schools that even should begin to think that way. And Michigan is certainly one that has that ability and those resources if they dedicate themselves. Michigan has always struck me, and is certainly during this college football playoff era, since it's been more magnified toward, okay, and prior to that, the BCS championship game was kind of a heightened playoff type format compared to the bowl structure. So it's become increasingly sifted toward this ultimate prize that is different than what we grew up with in the 70s, 80s, and so forth. And so Michigan has always struck me because of the academic standards and because of some of the indicators that we saw during the pandemic last year in what decisions were made in the Big Ten versus other conferences, that maybe there's an internal struggle at Michigan between, are we willing to sell out to all the things that need to be done to be an elite football power, or are we satisfied with taking what is perceived to be a high road, perceived to be academics first, and just being a good football program, a strong football program, and boasting more about our tradition and our past success, and maintaining a really good football team, and but holding true to our academic standards and our other standards, that there are more important things involved, and that it's academics first, athletics second. Or I think to have a chance to compete at the highest level, you have to have a buy-in. Not that you need to compromise your academic standard, or your just thought that the athletes are there first and foremost for athletics, and I don't want to go down that road, but that there needs to be a buy-in from all levels, starting with the top, or else you cannot have a football program that believes it's dedicated to winning national championships and wants that and will do anything possible, but they're not getting the needed support from the administration. It needs to be a top-down buy-in that we are committed to being the very best in football.
Right. And you have a case study in recent years of that exact thing happening with Clemson and with Dabo.
Yes.
Right.
I've talked about that.
I'd say about 6 or 7 years ago, he said, listen, you want to compete at the highest levels, you need to have the best facilities, you need to have certain things in place. So, he was an example of that actually coming to fruition and then winning 2 national titles. So is it possible? Yes. Michigan is definitely a different bird because it's colder, right? Very academic. We know this. We know that the academics are very strict. We know that it reminds me a little bit of Notre Dame, right, in terms of parallels, because Notre Dame has similar situations. It's cold. Academics are very rigorous. You're going to lose some of the 5-star talent to schools in the South. do you see that as well, like that kind of parallel?
I explained this to a couple friends on a text message tonight, and we've talked about it on here through the years. There's a huge disadvantage to playing in the Big Ten. What the Big Ten is doing in regards to football, while maintaining academic standards and being located in that geographic footprint, is actually remarkable. That the Big Ten is able to stay step in step with the SEC, not necessarily on the field, but in all other measurements surrounding football: money, TV ratings, rear ends in the seats. The Big Ten is right there with the SEC, and it's pretty remarkable because what we've undergone over the last 4 decades or so is migration to the South and to the West, and it has hurt the level of high school football in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and throughout the Midwest. And most of the talent it's even gone to the extent that Georgia has overtaken other states as the 3rd most prosperous high school football playing state in producing 4- and 5-star talent. And so there's a huge disadvantage to having to nail down the best players in your state or region and then go south, go Texas, go Florida, go California, go Georgia, and get players and convince them to come to Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, meaning Notre Dame, Penn State. But those have been, so Ohio State's obviously been the most successful at doing that. And then there's a tier of Michigan, Penn State, and Notre Dame who have been pretty darn successful themselves, and certainly Michigan and Notre Dame more so under Brian Kelly just in the last few years. Ironically, since he's left, they're wrapping up their best recruiting class maybe ever, or at least going back to the Lou Holtz days. So it's an uphill climb. There's a huge challenge, huge adversity there to overcome.
And potentially USC is the next one that's thinking of doing this, because they just gave allegedly $110 million to Lincoln Riley, right, to recruit 5-star talent in the West Coast. So are there blueprints for doing this? Yes. Ohio State, as you said, clearly the blueprint in this area, in the Big Ten area, right? Ohio State has had the most success by far out of everybody. It's not even close. So, we just have to do some soul searching as a program. But, we saw the future today at the end, right? J.J. McCarthy had a great touchdown at the end, albeit I know it was against Georgia's second-string defense, but Georgia's second-string defense is probably as good as some Big Ten's first-string defense. So I think that the future is there. It's just a matter of some decisions that need to be made. But, great job, Georgia. Great job, Alabama. Look forward to an awesome national championship.
Well, thank you so much for the call. I can appreciate you calling on a night like tonight when it was a pretty stark disappointment. So thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Michigan goes down to Georgia 34-11, and Cincinnati and Alabama in game 1. And of course, the Tide won it easily 27-6. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. This is Mike Flynn from Melbourne, Florida. How's it going?
It's going fine, Mike. I wish we would have had some more entertaining competitive games tonight, but it's going well.
You and I both. I spoke with you one other time back in October, I believe, where the family just moved down from Bay City, Michigan, and you said Melbourne sounds lovely this time of year.
Yes, I remember that call now.
So if you told me, Mark, back around Halloween, Michigan would win convincingly against a great Ohio State team and would go on to punk Iowa and win a Big Ten championship ring, only to be embarrassed to Georgia because that team never got off the bus, obviously. This was not SEC dominance over Big Ten. This was not Georgia dominance over Michigan. Georgia played a great game, and they took full advantage. We now know the analogy that Nick Saban teaches all of us, and he refers to it as rat poison. So I, like a true Michigan fan, am creative enough to find an excuse, and that is way too much time to recruit, to accept awards left, right, and center, only to show up to a game like the shell of your former self. And that was rough tonight. What say you?
So you're telling me that Michigan overlooked and was caught up in its past accomplishments and everything that ensued between the Iowa game and tonight?
Well, I'm not sure if you played college or high school football, Mark. I'd love to know. I'd love to know more about you. I would be very interested in backstories. You should do that for us one day. But I did play high school football and middle school football.
Yep.
And this is what I was afraid of, to be honest, as a Michigan fan. I've seen this before. You know the history of football amazingly well. And this reminds me of when we wouldn't show up and play Michigan State 5-7 years ago, or Washington Huskies, I believe in 90 or 91, the year before we enacted our revenge on those Washington Huskies. But when you see your team get shellacked, and they didn't have the energy, they didn't have the speed that they do have, but today it wasn't on display. It was sickening. Again, all the credit has to go to Georgia. I'm not going to shirk that responsibility, not to give them some love. They did what they're supposed to do. To be honest, I thought the way the game went, it would be more like 56-6. And I'm just saying from, an objective observer, okay? Getting the best O-line award, runner-up to the Heisman, all these things got into their heads, and they got cocky. And I think they got a bit soft. And I think they're just happy to be there. I think that was pretty evident. I don't think at all, in any way, shape, or form, that Georgia came out with their best game and destroyed Michigan at their best game. That did not happen one bit. And one of my last points will be, what ticks me off about the SEC bias is this is exactly what ESPN wanted with who played who. They say they don't want a rematch. Yeah, they did. It's apparent because look at the lines on both games. It was set up from the get-go. And I have an issue with that. So if a team can go to the Final Four and lose their conference championship, see, that's what this is all about. We know what it's like to feel like a Georgia fan. We know exactly what it feels like to get neutered and embarrassed because they were just a month ago. So with the bias, they get to still go to the Final Four, which makes absolutely no sense, and have a redemption play, which they've gotten tonight, so now they can play Georgia. Alabama. So, lots to process. But, yeah, at the end of the day, I believe Michigan had a great year. And I'm wondering how they're going to play Cincinnati and Michigan like third or fourth. Do you know how that might work?
How they're going to play Cincinnati? I didn't get that final comment.
Place them at the final rankings. How
who,
would
the
they,
AP?
Associate the third place?
Oh, I could care less what
place.
the AP does. I don't look at the AP. Right? I make my own rankings. I think the AP is a joke for the most part. Not every individual on the AP, of course, but the culmination of what they do is so illogical sometimes that I don't know what to tell you. I would think that Michigan's going to be ranked ahead of Cincinnati. I don't know. I don't care. I don't know what to answer. So
I'm just curious as to how they do that.
How they do it? Oh, people can vote for whatever they vote.
Right. So it's all on their own personal opinion. Yeah, that is pretty subjective. I
can give you umpteen examples of things that didn't make sense. 1986, Ohio State lost to Michigan. They finished with the same record. The AP voted Ohio State above Michigan. So we can go through all sorts of. I could sit here all night. So you understand what you stated there can't be proven. It's just a theory. There's some logic to it in regards to it's understandable. It's we all in living the human experience know that there are incentives and motivations and all those things that play into performance. But what you're stating is exactly that. It's a theory. It's some type of observation that is founded in just that's what you think it to be. But there's really no evidence of it. We know that it's happened before. We have perceived that it's happened before, and that's pretty much it. I have no response to that just because I don't know. When people ask me about motivation, I will lay out what I believe could be the motivations or the lack of motivations, but I will always state, I don't know what they're going to be. I don't know who these people are. I don't know them personally. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not at the practice. Anybody would be foolish to say this was for sure a letdown, or this was for sure Michigan on top of its game and they just got blown away by lack of talent. I think that anybody who would state that to be fact, and sometimes we get those calls that people say, this is a fact. Well, it's not a fact. It's your theory. But it's certainly understandable, and what you're stating is certainly plausible. Absolutely. Anybody who watched the Ohio State-Michigan game and saw the scene at Michigan Stadium following that game and understands that rivalry and what has transpired for decades, and specifically under Jim Harbaugh, would know and understand that there could be an emotional letdown that is just inexplainable. It's just
absolutely,
and
it's exhausting.
And maybe, well, most definitely they were able to carry that through for another game. I don't know that Iowa's one of the 5 best teams in the Big Ten, so they caught a break there. And when I say a break, that's not they had done enough. They've done enough work and showed themselves to be the best team in the Big Ten. But and that's always been a point of conversation about these bowl games and postseason games anyway, because we don't see this in any other sport where there's a separation of a month between winning prior to the ultimate step. Tom Brady doesn't play the AFC Championship game and then have to wait a month to perform again. And there should be some reasonable, if it was set up properly for the athletes, there would be a reasonable time given to rest and recoup, and maybe give them a little bit more than a week, but not much more than a week. 2 weeks. Give them a week off, then have them come right back, but not sit around for. And you will know this from the old days in the Big Ten, when those games used to be played, and there was no conference championship game. There was a 55 to 60 day gap between Ohio State when they were reaching BCS championship games and when they had played Michigan. You're talking about 2 months.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's a different team by that point.
So everything you state is plausible, and I can't prove this. So I think I clearly state what I know to be fact or logic, and then just what I think to be my opinion. And all we know is that Georgia was much better than Michigan tonight. That's what we know. And so that we can surmise that if they played 3 days from now, the same thing would happen. That would be the most tangible thing we could say. But we also know from watching sporting events over and over and over that that's probably not the truth. If they played a week from now, if they played a month from now, the outcome would, I highly doubt that if it was feasible that they played 100 times, that Georgia would beat them by 23 points on average. I just find that highly doubtful.
And that's my point. No one thought this would happen, and that was my concern, was that I've seen Michigan not show up in the past when they're supposed to, and that's when we get embarrassed the most. So, like Nick Saban said, rat poison. Way too much praise, way too much fun, and today they showed it. They're soft, they're slow, and Georgia was in their heads moment number one. Georgia wants Alabama back badly. And, my pragmatic voice in my head would say, okay, fair enough. Michigan didn't get off the bus. They weren't prepared. They got smoked. This is not indicative as to who Michigan is. At the end of the day, so what? It is what it is. And sometimes that saying has been so vague in my past, but tonight's a good example. Okay, whatever excuse you can come up with could very well maybe be correct, but it is what it is. Still got destroyed, and I think this team will get over it, and I think they're looking forward to spring ball. My last question to you is, I've only been a part of your channel, as you know, through Steve Dace, just this football season. What can we expect in the off season from yourself? Do you shut down for several months? Do you do recruiting specials?
No shutting down. No. You can flip this channel on in May, and it seems like it's the middle of the season. No, we talk college football all the time. I just to give you a little bit of background, and I don't want to bore anybody else because I have given the bio from time to time, but I won't do that tonight, it being such a big night. But I will just give you a hint into what's going on here, is that prior to doing this full time, I was a production operations manager at ESPN for 19 years, and I left there last October to do this full time. So I don't have any choice but to crank this out every day. And so that's what we'll do. And we will do it with transfer portal news and recruiting and rankings of positions across the country and ranking conferences and just anything you can imagine, early looks at schedules and all those things.
I definitely have to applaud you for taking that kind of chance on yourself. I look to that, and I applaud you, and hope it takes off like wildfire for yourself. And it gives us something to look forward to, because, as you know, we have the longest off season of all sports.
Yes, we do.
And every January, I always say I'm going to lose a lot of weight because I got about 80 pounds to lose, and I need to get on that. So we'll see. But I do appreciate you. In spite of being a Buckeye, your show is top notch, and it gives me something to look forward to through the off season. But I did definitely want to say, I hope you and yours have a beautiful 2022, and that goes for all the folks that watch your channel.
Well, thanks for that. Same to you. And despite the loss tonight, thanks for being gracious and calling us with your comments.
All right. God bless. Take care, man.
God bless you. Thank you. Before we take this next call, we've got to check in with Uncle Rico. Why didn't Michigan announce that Hutchinson opted out of the game tonight? You know, they did have a guy running around out there with his number on. How dare he? Uncle Rico, thank you so much for the super chat. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? This is Emmanuel.
Hey, Emmanuel. How you doing tonight? Happy New Year's.
I'm doing fantastic. Happy New Year to you.
Oh, wow. It's 12:02, so it is officially 2022, at least here in the Eastern time zone. And, you know, I am really a poor decorator. It's just something I don't think about. I should have had the set just decked out in balloons and streamers and party hats and the whole thing, but it just didn't cross my mind. What's on your mind?
No worries. Well, you know, I called in, I think, a couple of days ago, and I told you that Michigan had no chance against Georgia.
Yes. You were right.
And I think we saw what I was talking about. I mean, this last call, very nice guy, but he's a bit delusional. Georgia took them out to the woodshed and showed them who 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 runs things. I mean, this Georgia team beats Michigan 100 out of 100 times. Michigan ain't touching Georgia, just like Cincinnati wasn't beating Alabama. But what I will say, I think to get a general concept of what the SEC is like, I think that teams like Michigan and teams like Purdue and and these teams in the Big Ten, they're great, And I think for the rest of the SEC, it will be a flip of the coin as to who wins. We saw Tennessee, Purdue the other day. But when it comes to what separates the SEC, it always has the best team in the country, which is usually Alabama, which is leaps and bounds above the others. And then it will be an LSU, or this year a Georgia. And that's what we saw again. It's nothing new.
Yeah, for the most part. I would disagree. In 2014 and 15, I would tell you Ohio State had the best team in the country, but your point's well taken. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like that, that upper tier of team, like Ohio State may be the only one in Clemson, outside of that in the last couple of years.
They are the only ones.
Really
You're right. They are the only ones that have competed. Either one. They are the only two that have won games.
And the rest of the country can play very good football and even give these teams a tough game or even upset them, But it really comes down to you have a 5-star athlete going up against a 3-star athlete most of the time. And guess what? There's a reason that a 5-star is a 5-star. There's only about 30 to 45 stars each year. And that's what it comes down to, the depth and the better athletes that the SEC has right now because of
you're right.
The popularity.
You're right. It's about where they're located. So the SEC, it's almost like we can cite a lot of situations throughout history in which a certain country, a certain person, a certain whomever was fortunate to be placed where they were. They benefited from where they are. And the SEC schools benefit from where they're located. So first and foremost, if Jim Harbaugh wants to make a comment maybe tonight after the game about being born on third base, maybe he could make that comment about Kirby Smart. Not about him personally, but about the coaching position at the University of Georgia being on third base, because the better players are in the South. They've migrated from the North to the South and to the West, and they play more football in the South than they do in the West. So the population shift has benefited the SEC immensely. And I even find it remarkable what the Big Ten's able to do in maintaining the second best conference in the country and maintaining equal footing with the SEC from a number of other standpoints when it comes to TV ratings and attendance and revenue, because they're losing the battle every year, and it's been going on now for 40 plus years.
Well, they're not only losing the battle there. If you saw, for instance, with that, technically USC really needs to be, kind of shamed because, you had Bowers from Napa. He should be playing for SC or he should be playing for Cal. There's no reason a super athlete like Bowers should be in Georgia,
Yeah.
He should be in the Pac-12. So the only one that can compete geographically for talent and has prestige is USC. And, college football needs USC. We need a strong USC. We need a strong team in every conference, Ohio State, we need USC. We need Miami to come back, I love the SEC and I love football, but I like football more than I like a conference. So now you have, Kentucky is in basically a top 10 recruiting this year, and Missouri is number 11, right? So I wish Texas was recruiting like A&M, which they're doing a great job, but now A&M's the number one recruit in the country. So it's gonna get interesting. It's gonna get interesting.
Well, I hope you're right that it's going to get interesting because the way it's headed right now, it's not interesting. But you did mention Lincoln Riley and obviously USC, much like Miami. If money means something, and of course it does, they are telling us that they are sick of being mediocre and they're going to do something about it. I'm a little bit more sure about what USC is doing in its hiring of Lincoln Riley than Mario Cristobal in Miami, even though he's done well at Oregon. But you are completely right. It is not good for college football. People in the SEC, people in the Big Ten, whomever, they can make fun of the Pac-12, and I do it on a nightly basis in regards to just saying they're atrocious. It's bad football, and they have not played well, and the Pac-12 is just a mess right now. Anyway, but it's not good for college football. It's not good for college football for Alabama and Georgia to be playing in the SEC or in the national championship game. Now, if this happened once every 15 years, it wouldn't matter. Like, people would just look at it as, okay, well, that just so happened to be the case this year. We had a playoff. 2 SEC teams made it to the top, and they're playing in the championship game. But now this is happening 4 years after it already happened, and there's always an SEC champion in the final game, and it just turns off the rest of the country. It's not the SEC's fault,
now,
but it turns off the rest of the country.
On a note, the SEC, I don't know what the bowl record is, but they were 1-5. And a lot of that, I don't know how much it has to do with the opt-outs. You had Mississippi State the other day. They were playing, who'd they lose to?
Texas Tech.
They lost to. Yeah, they had 10 players out. 4 starters and 10 players total considered impact players. So I don't know if that's why the SEC is 1-5 or was 1-5.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that the result is all we know for sure. So we have to take the result, and that team, that school, that conference has to take accountability for the result. But that said, there's a reason we're talking college football here. And if we just took the result for the result, then we wouldn't have a conversation. We would just say, okay, the SEC must be horrible this year. They're 1-5 in conference in bowl games, but we know better than that. I had an ongoing argument with our Iowa guy, Corey Bratta, about the best conference in America, because I believe it to be the SEC. I don't think there's any question it's the SEC, but to be fair, based on the results on the field during the regular season out of conference, the Big Ten and the SEC were very comparable. And now during bowl season, especially up until today, the Big Ten had been dominant and the SEC had been horrible. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to take that into consideration, take off my preconceptions that because of the NFL draft and what it shows us, and because of the recruiting rankings, that the SEC is the best, and because of what happened in 2020 and 19 and 18 and 17, just focus on 2021, and that based on the results on the field, that the Big Ten may be the best conference this year, even though, again, my predisposition is that the SEC is the best conference because I know it to have the best talent. I think you have to have a balanced view at those results. Missouri lost to Army. Missouri should not lose to Army. Missouri was missing the SEC's leading rusher. Did that impact the game? Of course it impacted the game. They lost on a last-second field goal, but you can't hand Missouri the win. You got to be able to play with who you have. So take that into consideration. South Carolina and North Carolina both had opt-outs, and South Carolina was able to finally win a game for the SEC. Florida, we know all the upheaval down there. They basically had a coaching staff that was just kind of thrown together, and most of them were, taking a flight out of town as soon as the game was over, and had a quarterback who was hitting the transfer portal, and they lost to UCF. I don't know what to do with Auburn's loss to Houston. They had 3 of their top 4 defensive players out of the game. Of course, we know that despite Bo Nix's erratic play, that Auburn was never the same after he got hurt and left their team. And so they didn't have a starting quarterback. They didn't have 3 of their best defensive players. And it's also difficult to measure a conference when Auburn's 3-5 in the SEC. They are what, the 9th or 10th best team in the conference, and they're playing a team that went to its conference championship game in the American Conference. So what is supposed to be the result of that game? Sure, the SEC lost the game, but their 10th best team's taking on a team that made it to the conference championship game. So I don't think it's a good look for the conference. I think that they have to, if the wins are going to be celebrated in all these seasons in which the SEC goes, 8-3 in bowl play, and everybody says, well, the SEC is the best, they also have to take accountability for the losses. Purdue played a remarkable game the other night. They were missing one of the best wide receivers in college football, one of the best defensive ends in college football. They were missing basically their starting secondary and their second best receiver, and won that game against Tennessee. I thought it was a lights out game. It was maybe the best game of the bowl season, but I come away from that. Sure, you can mark one up for the Big Ten and mark an L for the SEC, but I'm in the business of evaluating teams and conferences. So me coming away from that game is that, shoot, those 2 teams could play 20 times and they probably split 10-10. I didn't come away from that game thinking, oh, well, Purdue's better, or coming away from that game thinking, well, Tennessee got ripped off, they're really better. It was a toss-up. So the SEC is the best conference, but has not put up the results up until tonight, when these are the 2 most important games that, of course, been played, and they came through. It's the best conference.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Tomorrow Arkansas is playing Penn State.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
And I think Penn State is missing 6 defensive players.
Oh, Lord. I need to look into that,
because
that was the game, much like last year when people asked me, what's the best non-playoff game? I said immediately, Oklahoma, Florida. I really want to see that game. Well, that game turned into a complete debacle since half the Florida team wasn't there. And the same thing this year with Penn State and Arkansas. When I saw the bowl announcements, I thought, that's the game I want to see. I want to see Penn State and Arkansas. Well, not necessarily with Penn State not showing up with half of its defense.
Absolutely. And then, you got a new defensive coordinator who was coaching another team.
Yeah.
And then it was like Oklahoma and Oregon the other night. That was going to be a horrible game. You had someone left over from the previous regime who's never coached a game before versus a retired coach. It reflected none of the regular season, right? Those 2 teams. Something's got to be done about the bowls. I'm really concerned about the bowls because I like them. I'd like an expanded playoff, but if you're going to have the bowls, you got to make it where it's a real reward and not a consolation, right? And I think that's what it's become, a meaningless consolation for many players.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we watched yesterday with Purdue and Tennessee, that took us back 20 years. That was a throwback to a bowl game because this wasn't 2 top 10 teams playing. These were just a 7-5 and an 8-4 from 2 really good conferences, the 2 best conferences. And it was just a great football game. And the place was packed. It didn't hurt that they were playing in Nashville, but the place was packed. And it was just a great football game, and it felt like a throwback to like a bowl game in 1998. Just from the importance that it felt, it just felt like an important game, even though it really didn't mean anything. It just means that Purdue's 9-4 and Tennessee 7-6. But it felt like there was something at stake. It felt like there was pride. And there was so much effort on that field, and the place was packed. It was rocking. I thought, now this is what bowl play used to be, and this is what it should be.
Can we go back?
I don't have the solution. I have a couple suggestions. One would be to have these sponsors pay the players. So if the sponsors are already sponsoring a bowl game, and I tried to do some research on this last night to see how much these sponsors, because I have no idea if a sponsor, when we see that Cheez-It has the Cheez-It Bowl, what does that mean? They're paying ESPN, and they are basically financing a bowl game. So I don't know if that's $5 million or $50 million. Well, based on my research, it seems to be somewhere between $500,000 and $20 million, depending on the bowl. So can we take a portion of that, whether that's $1 million, and divide it between 200 football players and pay them $5,000 each, and say you get a game check for $5,000, or the winners get $8,000 and the losers get $2,000. So you're going to try harder now. I don't know. That's one suggestion.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one, you know, whether maybe even only giving bowls to teams that reach 8 wins now, rather than, you know, them going 6-6. But yeah, I'd hate to see the bowls go away, but it almost seems like we've gone too far to the point where it's only going to get worse with opt-outs, you know, where literally no one's going to want to field a team, you know, a la maybe A&M this year.
Well, let's understand something. We do have an extra added issue this season and last season with the pandemic. So let's not mix up the pandemic issues with the opt-out issues, but it just exasperates the opt-out issues, where we have more players who miss the games because of the pandemic. So that hopefully will cease at some point, okay? And we won't have those issues to compound the opt-outs. Well, I think the opt-out situation should level off to some degree, because there's only so many players that have that type of NFL potential to opt out.
Yeah, and also maybe make the bowl week the week, you know, there'd be a bye week and then just start bowl week, where all the bowl games are a week, 2 weeks from the end of the season, rather than having to shut it down the regular season. And I'm stuck around, you know, I'm a college football player stuck around for 3 weeks, trying to make up my mind, you know, not doing a whole lot, getting ready for, you know, another 6-6 team. I don't know. I think we need to make the season shorter and closer, especially now with COVID, right?
Well, it's the shortest.
This thing's going to be around.
It's the shortest season in sports already, and I really don't know how your suggestion fits into the calendar, because we played conference championship games on December 4th. If they shut down for 2 weeks, then it's the 18th. Okay. There were already bowl games starting on the 18th. First of all, there were 7 games on that Saturday. So bowl season is already starting just 2 weeks after the conference championship games. And if we move up all these other games, then everybody's going to be playing at the same time. What are we going to fit the entire bowl schedule into 3 days? Like, I don't know how we're going to accommodate that.
It's bowl week. That's like bowl week, a whole week, 24-hour football. Yeah. Well, I better let you go. It's been awesome. I hope you have a happy New Year.
Happy New Year
to everybody in the chat and that watches.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Thanks again, Mark. Have a good one.
We appreciate it. You have a great one as well. Thank you, everyone, for the support. Financially, smash the like button, please. You can also contribute at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Let's get to our next call here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hello, this is Grayson.
Hey, Jason. How you doing tonight?
Hey, so I just wanted to say a few things. First of all, so I've seen a lot of people on social media disparaging Michigan and Cincinnati after the game today because of, how they got blown out by Alabama and Georgia. However, I just wanted to say that personally, I think that Michigan and Cincinnati are both quality football teams that not only deserve their college football spots, but that were two of the best teams outside of probably Ohio State. I think you're just seeing the difference between top 5 teams and top 2 teams. And I think this is magnified, as I know I've heard you talk in the past about that month off. When you see and allow time for 5-star athletes like Pickens and Brian Robinson to get healthy, you see just the talent disparity that expands with that extra time to prepare. Would you agree?
Yes, I do. So if these teams played during the regular season, we would not see the disparity in scores that we do, because all we have to do is look to regular season scores, and Alabama's not going out there pummeling LSU and Auburn and Arkansas and all those teams by 3 touchdowns constantly. And the same thing with the score that we saw between Georgia and Michigan. Well, the response that I'm sure I'm going to get from certain people is, well, that the SEC is just that good. No, we're seeing during bowl play, and we also saw during the non-conference season with the likes of LSU losing to UCLA and a number of other games, that the SEC, while the best conference, is not that much better. To your point, what happens? So I think the classic example, this is the best case example I can give. The LSU team that won the national championship with Joe Burrow in 2019 just annihilated Oklahoma. They had a 5-touchdown lead at halftime, just crushed them. If they played Oklahoma during the regular season, they wouldn't have beaten them by 5 touchdowns and had a 5-touchdown lead at halftime. Shoot, they only beat Texas by a late touchdown in the season opener or the second game of the season. I think when athletes get laser focused and know it's a enormous game, that there is the adrenaline rush and everything involved in the preparation to get them focused and magnified in that one game being so important that it even separates what was a talent gap into a greater talent gap, usually. Not all the time, but usually. And so we see teams that have great athletes and are loaded with talent, like that LSU team in 2019, even increase its level of play even more so. And in that particular year, we saw LSU and then Clemson and Ohio State played a ridiculously great game with tons of NFL talent all over the field. And we saw Oklahoma, which was a good team, but they were decidedly worse. Well, they wouldn't have lost to those teams by 1,000,000 points in a regular season matchup, but it gets all that gets magnified in a playoff setting most of the time. And that's why we see some blowouts, why we see a lot of blowouts.
Yeah. One thing I also have been looking at recently is I've heard you talk about, and as we were just saying, the disparity in talent. So I actually went on the 247 recruiting rankings, and just to kind of highlight how big of a gap there is between those very good teams and the elite teams. So in the 2022 recruiting rankings,
yes,
the difference from positions 81 and 32 is the same as the gap from 10 to 1. So,
yep.
I mean, I think that just shows.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the difference between a team like, or the recruiting class of like an Alabama or Georgia, and then you compare that to just a team like Michigan, and then that from 30 to 80, that's the difference between a mid-tier group of 5 and a 8 and 4 not Power 5 team. I mean, that's
so you said 32 and 81 was the same as between 1 and 10.
Yeah.
So that's probably like
Yeah, and that's
Mississippi
compounded over
State
4 years.
and that's like Mississippi State and a mid-level MAC or Conference USA team.
Yeah, and those classes, especially at places like Alabama and Georgia, they're stacked over 4 years. So that talent gap has compounded, and that's the result, or that's where you see where like I firmly believe that just because they got blown out, that Cincinnati and Michigan aren't scrubs that shouldn't have been there, but that the difference between them and those top teams is just that great.
Are you aware that 247 Sports has a team talent ranking? So basically, they do the same thing that you just did, but they take the entire roster. So I'm looking at 2021. So they take the entire roster for all the teams in the FBS for 2021, not just the recruiting class. And so you can see exactly what you're talking about, but over the entire roster.
I was not aware of that.
So I'm trying to do the same thing that you did.
I will check that out.
So right now, Alabama is the most talented team in the country, according to 247 Sports. Georgia's 2, Ohio State's 3, etc. Michigan's 15. So the gap between Alabama and, let's say, number 10 USC is 117 points. So let's see, that would be 767. Let's see where we can. Well, if we're just going by point totals, that's just the difference between 10 and 20. So anyway, you can give it a look. It is interesting. For example, Georgia's got 19 5-stars and Michigan has 3 on the current roster. Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia are the only 3 teams with more than 10 5-stars.
Yeah. Because I think that's important to point out, because I've been seeing some people say that Cincinnati would be like a below average or average 6-16 in the SEC, and I was rooting for Cincinnati, but so I have a slight bias, but I just don't think that that's true, because I don't think that Alabama. There's no one like Alabama, or, in this season, Georgia's, climbed to, that level, or at least near it. There's not, the whole conference is not Alabama. And I think, teams like Houston beating Auburn, and, again, I know that some of those SEC teams were a little bit depleted. But some of Cincinnati's opponents were decent. We're decent. They weren't great, but some of them are decent. And I don't think that Cincinnati would be a 6-6. I think they would be in the more, maybe Kentucky, maybe Ole Miss range, where they probably would lose 2 or 3 games in the SEC. They'd probably lose to Alabama, Georgia, and slip up another 1 or 2 times. But I don't think that they would, in a Power 5, or like an SEC, that they would just be some bum team that, wouldn't make a bowl.
So how do you explain this? And I agree with everything that you're saying, but there is development and there is coaching, of course. Cincinnati right now is the 54th most talented team in the country. Illinois is higher than that. Colorado is higher than that. Boston College, and I could go on and on.
Yeah. The thing is, I think, so first of all, you can point to talent roster, and I do agree that, as I've talked, obviously I do agree and that it definitely has something. However, I think you could point to a team like Vanderbilt that is consistently like mid-30s, 40s, around there in recruiting. Yet
I don't know that they're that high.
Let me double check. I thought they were.
Their
But-
team talent ranking is 59, which would mean that they're averaging a class at 59. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. I thought for maybe I was looking here, let me look at it. Okay. Well, regardless, what I was gonna say is that I don't believe that if you put them against, because that's like that's probably 50 something is, an upper tier G5 or some, or not, G5, but some of those other teams, I don't think that they would be playing at that level. Or, there are some other teams where I feel that their recruiting rankings, or a Florida or an LSU, I know obviously this is a down year for them, but obviously they recruit very well, but can also have poor seasons.
So what is your thought if Cincinnati took the place of somebody in the SEC West, Auburn, and they were given Auburn's schedule this year?
Okay.
What do you think they would do?
Let me quickly pull up Auburn's schedule.
Auburn might be a little brutal to deal with, but anyway, they went 6-6. They went 3-5 in the conference. They lost to Penn State. They have to play Georgia, and they also played who in the SEC East? They played Georgia and South Carolina.
Yeah, so I think they probably. I think that Cincinnati is a better team than Penn State. Personally, I think they lose to Georgia. I think they lose to Alabama, and I think that between Ole Miss, A&M, Arkansas, they lose at least one of them. So I would put Cincinnati with Auburn's schedule at 9-3, maybe 8-4. Maybe they slip up one more time.
Yeah,
personally,
I'm with you.
I think Cincinnati is, again, I think they're a good team. That I agree they're not on Alabama or Georgia's level. However, I also think that no one in the country outside of, after what we saw today, maybe Ohio State, is on their level. So that's a pretty hard bar to hit.
Yeah, if they were playing that schedule week to week, it shouldn't surprise anyone to see Cincinnati go out and beat an LSU by a touchdown, and the next week go out and play Texas A&M and lose by 10. I just think that the rigors of an SEC schedule would catch up with them to a certain extent, and they would drop games. But they would also beat a lot of pretty good teams in the SEC. And I think the same thing in the Big Ten. I think that if they played, I think it would be a little bit more key on who they played in the Big Ten and whose schedule they would get. But shoot, if they were suddenly Michigan State and they played Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, they played a Wisconsin and Iowa or whomever in the West, I think we're looking at roughly the same result.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe a little bit better.
I think that. Yeah, I mean, however, if you take the flip side of the other, based on what we've seen with the American this far in bowl season, as well as what we've seen with some of the other conferences like the ACC and the Pac-12, I mean, the American, although I agree with what you were saying earlier about, if the Americans like 2 and 3 playing, the SEC, 6, or the SEC, 8th best team. I mean, the Americans done decently well. I mean, they've won all 3 games, and then the 3 games that were canceled, I think they easily could have won those as well. I think East Carolina was playing Boston College, SMU was playing Virginia, and I can't remember the other one. But I think that if you put Cincinnati in the Pac-12 or the ACC, I don't, especially the coastal of the ACC, I don't see too many losses on there for them. Like if you gave me, Pitt schedule or Wake Forest schedule, or I think they would lose, in my opinion, no more than 1 game. I think they easily could have, in an easier Power 5 conference, not the SEC or Big Ten, which, they would probably end up with, 3 or so losses, that they could have also still been close to national championship, or college playoff.
Yeah. I've got to think that if Cincinnati was in the Big 12, the ACC, and the Pac-12, and I'm not lumping those three together because I do think there's a disparity there, but just that general of a schedule that you just outlined, a Pitt schedule, an Oklahoma State schedule, or whatever, that they're better than just about all those teams on the schedule. But those games that they played and didn't look good against Navy and Tulsa and Tulane, if they do that against North Carolina, they do that against NC State, they do that against UCLA, they're going to lose those games. So they're going to. I'm thinking they're going to lose a game almost for sure. Instead of going undefeated, they're going to lose a game, and probably 2 would be my guess.
Yeah. So after seeing Michigan and Cincinnati's games today, I know I've heard you talk a couple times about, based on the resume, what teams should have been in, or like that you thought the teams that deserved to get in got in. Obviously, Ohio State's going to be your third, but who else, or who do you think anyone else should have been in, or that would have done a better job against your, would have actually had a chance to beat Alabama or Georgia, other than Cincinnati or Michigan?
I think Ohio State's the only somewhat obvious choice, and I'm not stating them as a slam dunk for sure, even because I think they had too many defensive issues to be a obvious answer. So I'm throwing them out there as the obvious choice. I believe that Ohio State is one of the 4 best teams in the country, but as I think you stated earlier in this conversation, there could be a big difference between number 1 and number 4.
Yeah, definitely.
Other than Ohio State, I would look to, late in the season when Oklahoma State was playing really well, and I was pulling for them on one level just because I wanted to see something different, but I just envisioned that offense that struggled against just about everybody they played in the Big 12, just thinking, how does this project against Georgia? It doesn't look pretty to me.
Yeah.
I do think that Ole Miss is the 3rd best team in the SEC. So I think they've got some validity there. My only considerations to take the spot for Cincinnati, just on not that they earned it, but would be Ohio State first, probably Notre Dame second, and Ole Miss third.
Yeah. I think the unfortunate thing is that I still think that most of those games, with almost whoever you put from the country in there, I don't think we really would have seen too different of a result. Maybe marginally. Yeah. But I think, with the preparation, Alabama and Georgia win against almost anyone they play, probably 90 times out of 100.
Yeah, there's a big problem in this sport. There's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking my call, and Happy New Year's to you and to everyone that is on the show. And yeah, I've enjoyed listening to your college football analysis all year.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it as well. Thank you so much for the call, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right. I posted, hopefully they saw it, So I have posted the various super chats, but look at the banner right now. Uncle Rico, Rick James, Khalid, One Scoop John. Thank you so much for the contributions. Appreciate that. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
It is the real MVP. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I'm glad you're wearing the Kentucky blue.
I am.
Much appropriate since we're going to beat Iowa today.
In addition to that, the real MVP, look at the graphics. The graphics are even matching the Kentucky blue. We are all decked out in Kentucky blue, top to bottom.
Yes, sir. And I looked up, I have that exact same jacket, and that's an Old Navy jacket, Mark.
Is it? I thought this was
Yes, it is.
what insignia is that? Is that Old Navy? I thought it was my kids actually got me 2 more of these for Christmas, and they matched the insignia, and I can't remember the company. You're telling me it's Old Navy, huh? Okay.
I've got the sticker on mine, so maybe when you get it from Old Navy, the sticker, they change out the sticker.
Okay.
That's what I assume. So, listen, everybody's talking about the playoffs. There's some issue that needs to be had with Pac-12. You're being relegated, Pac-12. You are not a Power 5 conference anymore. You're a bunch of scrubs. AAC, move on. You're a Power 5 conference now. Washington State, are you kidding me? You lost to Central Michigan. Central Michigan?
Yeah.
And you didn't even lead? And this is one of the best teams in the Pac-12 from what I'm hearing.
I guess they are. Yeah, they were in contention to go to the Rose Bowl, to go to the Pac-12 championship game with a week left in the season. Yes. And they're losing to Central Michigan in the Sun Bowl. And Oregon State is losing Oregon State's losing to Utah State in a bowl game. And Arizona State lost to Wisconsin. No shame in that. But 0-3. And
Oregon lost to Oklahoma.
Oregon lost to 0-4. Okay. And again, I wouldn't go crazy about 0-4, except for 2 of the games for two decent group of 5 teams. And this is after this abysmal regular season. The conference is terrible.
They only got 1 more bowl game left.
It's a terrible conference. Yes, they do. They could beat Ohio State. Then that would be the running joke, and that would be the aberration of the college football season, that the Pac-12 couldn't barely beat group of 5 teams, and they had 2 wins over Ohio State.
Yeah. Well, I mean, less talented teams just beat Ohio State this year. So, shout out to Michigan for proving that talent does matter. They're just less talented than Georgia.
Yes.
The rest of the sport needs to catch up to Alabama and Georgia. That's the problem. They're just so much better than third. And Texas A&M, at least they're making a run for it. But it's just embarrassing. Every year we come in here and say, oh, these playoff games, they're going to be so close. They're never close. Except for like 3 of them. I mean, it's hyperbolic, but this is, Mark, I've got to ask you this. You want to expand the playoff, but none of these games are almost ever close. Why would you think expanding it would help this issue? Because I think you would get so many blowouts that it would just become numb to the average college football fan.
That's not my motivation to make the games close. I have no responsibility there. That's not my responsibility. The teams are the teams, and it's the responsibility is on the football programs to be good, to play each other. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to build an equitable, fair system.
That's fair. That is fair. Do you agree with my take that the Pac-12 needs to be moved down to the group of 5?
I don't want to pull that trigger for a number of reasons. I don't want to do it based on 1 season or 2 or 3 seasons. And I also don't want to do it because it would just change the structure of college football. It would kind of close off everything west of Oklahoma. And I don't think that's good for the sport. Plus, I don't want to pin all this on one man, but Lincoln Riley's arrival in USC might change things.
Right. Well, we thought that everybody thought the same thing about Chip Kelly going back to UCLA.
Yeah, but
That-
UCLA is not USC.
That didn't work out. Yeah, but Pac-12 isn't as any relevant today as they were the day they hired Chip Kelly.
Yeah, but UCLA has never
And
been
the
USC.
AAC
UCLA
That's
is
true.
a top 40 program. USC is an all-time great elite program that was winning national championships and competing for national titles as recent as 2008. And actually like
Let me ask you this,
2016. Yeah.
I know I'm going to talk about next year, or this year, I guess, since it's 2022 for people on the East Coast. USC goes 13-0. Cincinnati goes 13-0. There's one spot left. Who would you give it to?
Cincinnati and who?
I would go with the AAC team. USC.
Next year.
That's how. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how the season played out, but if it played out similar to this season, the American Conference wasn't good this year.
No, it wasn't good, but at least but neither's the Pac-12. For how bad the American Conference has been this year and in down years, the Pac-12 is worse, in my opinion.
You got to understand,
awful.
if USC wins the Pac-12 and is 13-0, number one, they would have beaten Notre Dame next season. So I'm going to pull up Cincinnati's schedule. I doubt if they're playing another game like that this year coming up.
This is a great time while Mark's pulling up the schedule to remind everybody to like the video. Please remember to like the video. It's completely free.
Cincinnati's big game next year, besides Indiana. So they played Indiana this year, and they will play them again next year. And, of course, Indiana was horrible. They play at Arkansas to start the season. Okay, good for them.
Arkansas can be a great team. They had the toughest schedule in the entire college football and win
Yeah, they did.
8-4. So they could be a potential team that has 9-10 wins. Potentially. I don't think their schedule can be any harder than it was this year. I mean, they had to play both teams in Texas. That schedule was brutal. Top to bottom.
The conference schedule was brutal. That Texas game didn't turn out to be anything that. So I agree with you. Arkansas had a difficult schedule, but in assessing it again after the season, I don't know that it was quite as hard as I thought at one point, because again, Texas turned out to be pretty bad, and Arkansas, much like the other SEC teams, they don't play anybody else. So their other 3 non-conference games were layups. But yeah, they played an extremely difficult schedule. Yes, they did. Because they play in the SEC West,
and they played extremely
and they had to play
well.
Georgia. You tack on the SEC West, Texas, Georgia. Who else did they play in the Missouri? And now they're going to play a bowl game against Penn State. Yeah, it's a tough schedule.
So, Pac-12, I'm just done with that conference in general. And listen, you said it earlier. It's not, you want a more equitable schedule, but the teams have to show up and at least play well on the field. You can't be out there sabotaging yourself by losing to Central Michigan and never having a lead, getting whipped. The only reason Washington State even had a chance was because of a horrible interception Central Michigan threw. And they cut from to 14-21. So it's
I don't know if you heard the earlier caller that was running through. Chris was running through his, I think he calls them his proficiency rankings, and he was basically saying that the Pac-12 wasn't that bad. And I said, Chris, I don't need to hear your rankings. I'm just going through every team in the Pac-12. And aside from one miracle that occurred in Columbus, Ohio by Oregon, the conference did absolutely nothing. BYU went 5-0 against the Pac-12. They should probably be playing in the Rose Bowl. And BYU just lost to UAB a couple weeks ago, and they went 5-0. And 4 of those games were against the better teams in the Pac-12. We can go team by team in the Pac-12, and none of them beat anyone aside from that one
Mark,
game.
everybody's going to say UCLA beat LSU.
Okay.
So clearly beating the 6-6 LSU team means you're one of the best conferences.
It's LSU's talented. Are they good? No, they're not good, but they're decent. They're okay. I get that. LSU beat Texas A&M. UCLA beat a team that's a top 40-ish team. So there you go. All the other conferences have 7, 8, 10, 12 wins that are like that. They have none. They lost to a bunch of group of 5 teams, FCS teams. Awful. The whole conference.
I mean, the AAC, for having a down year, they've beaten multiple SEC teams in bowl games.
They did.
And I know they were missing players and stuff, but I don't think the Pac-12 wouldn't have been able to do it. Well, Mark, how would you close the talent gap in college football?
Well, you can't do anything to close the talent gap because it's not the NFL. It's not an organization that is looking out for itself. They're all separate conferences, separate schools. Nobody has the responsibility to enforce any kind of rule that is going to close the talent gap.
Okay. So there's nothing we can do to prevent Bama from just keep turning in 4- and 5-star players.
No.
Georgia, because I've heard things like salary cap, scholarship reduction, or stuff like that. But you don't think that's a good idea, or you don't think it's
reduction.
Possible?
So that was done. I don't know how many years ago, with the same thought in mind that it would spread out and reduce the ability of these schools that have unlimited budgets of just hoarding players. So there was a scholarship reduction whenever that was, probably in the 80s. I don't know if there would be some kind of legal action that players would take against that, because then suddenly more of them have to walk on and pay for their tuition. But before we get deep into that, there needs to be a governing body over college football that would make decisions for the best and for the good of college football as a whole. Otherwise, it's not anybody's responsibility to squash Alabama and other schools that are dominating their conferences. Again, this is not the NFL. The NFL, for the good of the league, they have a draft. And so when you think about it, is it fair that the Super Bowl champion drafts last and the worst team in the league drafts first? No. Why should they draft first and they draft last? Why should they be given the benefit of, why should they be gifted something for being awful and the Super Bowl champion penalized for winning the Super Bowl? That's basically what it is. If it was fair, there would be some kind of randomizer that would spit out where you draft. But they do it to even the league. They weight the schedules. If you were really good last year, they weight your schedule down. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. And if you were awful last year, they lighten your schedule. Is that fair? Should you be propped up just because you're bad? No, but that's what they do to try to make it more competitive. But there's no.
You also get more chaos.
Yeah, there's no governing body in college football to do anything like that.
We need a commissioner, ideally somebody who knows a lot about college football and the game of college football. I don't know. Apparently, there's nobody like that though in the entire world.
I don't think so. Yeah,
everybody's just out. I know, weird. I mean, the NFL found one, the NBA found one, the NHL found one, FIFA exists, but yet college football can't find one. So I thought 2020 was the make or break year for that type of thing, because I thought there's going to be a commissioner or something like that. 2020, when the pandemic hit, they're all going to line up together in the best interest of the sport. Nope, they all just went in their separate corners. So I think it kind of killed the dream forever. So that's the point. And finally, Mark, there is one more game, or the most important game is yet to be played. That's the national championship game. Have you seen the line for it?
No.
Georgia is 2.5-point favorite.
Okay.
I'm assuming you're on Alabama.
I'm not on anyone. That game's 10 days away.
Mark, I'll look out for the prediction and what you think the score will be. Thank you for making great content, and have a happy New Year.
Thank you, sir. We always appreciate it. It's always great to hear from you. Happy New Year. All right. We do have a super chat coming in. Appreciate that so much. Let me go grab it. First of all, we've got Span super sticker. Thank you so much for that, Span. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for that. And then also, we got to be up and at 'em by noon at the latest tomorrow. Bowl game starting at noon. This really irritates me that we've got a bowl game at noon. Then we've got two others starting at 1. So there's going to be 3 games on at the same time. So this doesn't happen earlier in the bowl season when all the crappy teams are playing. My apologies to all the crappy teams, because I respect everyone who made a bowl game. You know what I mean? When the lesser teams were playing, they had isolated exclusive TV windows. And now we've got the likes of Notre Dame and Kentucky and Arkansas and Penn State and Iowa and Oklahoma State. We have those teams playing. We've got top 15 teams playing, and they're all playing at the same time. That annoys me. And maybe I'm going to shoot a video about that. I think I will. Because you know what I did when I was at ESPN? I sent an email to the head of ESPN and said, why do we have 3 bowl games on at the same time that at that point all involved SEC and Big Ten teams? We are killing our audience by having people that are, let's say, Michigan State fans, so they're going to watch the Michigan State Auburn game. But if given the chance, they would watch the Michigan game too, and they would watch the Wisconsin game too. And then we've got Auburn fans who, of course, they're going to watch their game. But if these other games were being played by Florida and Texas A&M, well, they would watch those games too. So why are they all being played at the same time? When we've got the Louisianas of the world and the Central Michigans and the Western Michigans and the Utah States of the world playing exclusive TV windows, but we've got Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, Kentucky, Iowa, Penn State, and Arkansas all playing at the same time tomorrow. It really annoys me. If I can effectively gather my thoughts on that topic to express it a little bit better than I just did, I will post a video on that, because I just think it's ridiculous. It's stupid. It is not servicing the college football fan JT Sports, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate that. Want to close the talent gap? Tell Saban to retire. There's your answer. JT Sports nailed it. The man is incredible. Got to give it up for him. Chuck C's here. Great work, Mark. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well, Chuck C. Appreciate you being here. There have been several South Florida starters for Bama lately, and throw in Najee Harris and Bryce Young from Southern California. USC and Miami could help everyone with recruiting. Appreciate that, Chuck. Good point. Uncle Rico's back. Mark Rogers for college football commissioner. Uncle Rico, wouldn't that be something? Probably some of you would hate me and some of you would love me very soon because I would go to it. But you know what? This is one thing I could promise you. I would be asking all of you for your suggestions. I'm not saying I would take them. I wouldn't necessarily. I would shoot most of them down and say, that's really stupid, but thanks for commenting. But hey, you would have direct access to the college football commissioner because I would be here. I couldn't be here as much as I am now. And actually, I would get a pretty decent paycheck. I think Roger Goodell's making something like $50 million a year. So I'll take a tenth of that. Pay me $5 million a year, but I'm still doing one live stream a week right here. And I'm talking to all of you, and you guys could just let me have it and say, Commissioner, this sucks. That sucks. Why'd you do that? Here's my suggestion. And I would be right here to listen to all of you. You have my guarantee. You also have my guarantee that this gets mentioned from time to time, and I don't believe this is going to happen, nor do I really want it to happen because I want this to work. But if I would go somewhere, fill in the blank, some other media outlet would pay me enough money to drag me away, I would still keep this channel. That would be part of my contract, and I would still open up shop once a week to talk to all of you. All right, we got Richard here. As a Notre Dame fan that was at the Cincinnati game, shake my head. As a person that lives in Michigan, shake my head. SEC can be weak 3 through 12, but the top tier of the SEC teams are so much better than everyone. Richard, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, but you raise a good point, and there's certainly evidence to what you're stating. There's certainly evidence. Let's see. Appreciate everybody being here. You guys are amazing. We've got Colin chiming in. So you still doubt the SEC? When did I doubt the SEC? I probably stayed at least once a day on here in some form and have for the last 7 or 8 years that the SEC is the best conference. Truth be told, check out my video. Yes, I picked Michigan to win. Okay. I clearly stated, okay, all wisdom, all logic, everything is telling me to pick Georgia. And I even said earlier this week, it would not surprise me. This is the score I spit out. It would not surprise me in any way if Georgia won this game 48-14. If somebody told me Michigan won the game 48-14, I would be shell-shocked. No way. But I could see Georgia running away with this game by 4 or 5 touchdowns. Okay, so that was clearly stated that obviously I believed Georgia to be the decidedly better team. Okay? And I even stated on my prediction video, Georgia would win this game 65 to 70% of the time. Now, it's easy to say after watching what we watched tonight, maybe they win it 98% of the time. But bear with me. This was before they played. I clearly stated Georgia is the better team. They would win this game 65 to 70% of the time. However, it might have been a stupid hunch, but I just kind of went with it. And partially because Steve Dace on the Michigan podcast 2 weeks ago pressed me for a score. He didn't press me for a score. He asked me for a prediction, and I said, Steve, you know me. I don't usually make my predictions until a couple hours before the game. That's just me. I just like to wait till the last minute. But he wanted to score, so I just spit out Michigan 27-24. And so I thought, well, I still have time to change that, and I probably will change that because I believe Georgia's the better team, and they should win the game, and they've got waves and waves of five-star talent. But, I just went with it. I just thought, what the heck? This is going to be Michigan's night, and I was wrong. I'm still 10-1 against the spread the last 11 games, so there's that. So, Colin, so you still doubt the SEC? Man, I'm on here constantly saying the SEC is the best conference, even in the face of 1-5 in bowl games. And you can make all the excuses you want for the SEC. They played 6 games against teams and were 1-5 before today. And I was still saying that the SEC is the best conference. Okay, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey there, this is Jim Gallagher.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Happy
Good.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, you got some folks that are calling in tonight that are talking a little bit crazy. I don't know if they've been hitting the eggnog a little bit too hard or what, but they're not even dealing with reality, it doesn't appear to me.
Okay.
I'd like to just point out a couple of things. You got Cincinnati, which was number 4 team in the country, right? According to all the polls. And you've got Michigan, which I believe was number 2 in the country and won the Big Ten.
Yes.
If you combine their scores tonight, both of them, they scored 1 garbage touchdown against Alabama and Georgia.
Yes.
The 2 of them combined scored 17 points total. Am I right about that?
You are right. Your math is impeccable.
Okay. So I just kind of wanted to point that out because some people are just running wild and making all kinds of excuses. The simple fact is tonight nobody had any opt-outs. The 4 teams played with their best players, so there's no excuses. The score is what it is. The Alabama team was a crippled team with 5 or 6 starters missing in the game, and they had one of those starters that was caught 100 balls during the year and for 1,000 yards. So there's no excuses for Cincinnati. They were averaging 40 points a game. And there's no excuses for Michigan. I would also like to point out to these people that you can't really compare conferences when you have so many opt-outs. This year especially. Every team is opting out, kids that are not going to be drafted very high. Even some of them are opted out. So you're not talking about playing now the teams that during the regular season played in these bowl games. If you were able to compare them, you would have to compare a team like, let's take Houston, for example. Houston finished 2nd in the AAC. So to compare conferences favorably, they would have to play Georgia because Georgia finished 2nd in the SEC. And likewise, and on down the line, if a team finished 4th in the Big Ten, they would have to play whoever finished 4th in the SEC. Then you could make a fair comparison. And one other thing on my mind was about trying to regulate or punish people for winning. That's not the way you play. You play to win. Every team plays to win. Put 11 people on the field at the same time. Their best 11 people. Best team wins. You don't punish a team because they're good. The way you beat that team is for your team to get better. Work harder and get better. That's how you win. not by regulating or forcing one team to be punished in some way or another because they're good. It's just not how it's done. That's my opinion. So I kind of got a lot off my chest tonight because people have, like I said, been talking a little bit crazy about some of this stuff. And I just wanted to put my opinions out there and would like to get yours. I'm pretty sure that Georgia is going to be favored against Alabama, even though Alabama has already beaten them head-to-head by 3 touchdowns. So what do you think about that kind of situation?
So let me comment to the first comments that you made about comparing conferences. So I don't disagree with anything that you said. I do think that some things need to be put in context a little bit more, but I don't disagree with anything that you said, because when there are no opt-outs and 2 teams played with equal motivation and with a championship on the line like we saw tonight, 4 teams, then there's really nothing to excuse anything. We did have a situation last year with Ohio State where they did have a ton of guys miss the game with COVID. But anyway, we're not there. We're focused on these 4 games, or these 4 teams in these 2 games, and the results were the results, and they were decisive. It's not like a situation like the Tennessee-Purdue game where there was a crazy game and back and forth and a controversial call at the end. No, we had 2 butt kickings. Okay, so your points are well taken. I do think we need to consider, to a certain extent, though, the possibility that not the same team shows up every week. So, for example, do you think that Alabama is a better team than Texas A&M?
Yes, I think they are a better team.
But they did lose to Texas A&M this year.
I would point out, too, that you're right, they did lose. They lost at a very hostile and very energetic atmosphere. But I would also point out that they lost late. And I'm an Alabama graduate and class of 63, so I'm kind of an old timer.
Joe Namath was there, right?
I'm not making excuses for Pardon?
Joe Namath was there at that point.
He had just got there when I was leaving. Barry Bryant came the year before I did. I came there in 59.
Okay.
And then Namath came there, I believe, in 62 or 63, just as I was going out. But I'm not making excuses for Alabama losing to A&M, because late in the game, they had the lead. They had come back, as I recall, from about 2 or 3 touchdowns down, and had taken the lead late. There's no excuse when you have a lead late to lose the game. I don't care who you are, unless it's officiating or some weird trick play or something like that. So I don't give Alabama any excuses either for losing to A&M. But I think they are a better team. Obviously, they're playing in the national championship game, and A&M is 8-4.
So the point I'm making is that, yes, you are right. That Texas A&M Alabama game did in no way look anything like what we just watched with Michigan and Georgia, for example. That was not a close game by any stretch of the imagination versus the Alabama-Texas A&M game being close. I was just pointing out the fact that the best team doesn't always win the game on that particular night. That's all we have to.
True.
That's all we have to go on is the result from that one game on that night. But that there are possible results. If only we could see these teams play 100 times, but we can't. So yes, the result on the field stands, and that's what we have to go by.
Yeah, that's all you have to go by, and regardless of the circumstances. But you can't make fair comparisons when your main players, maybe you're missing your running back, or you're missing your quarterback, or you're missing 3 or 4 defensive players. You can't make fair comparisons that way in the bowl games. That's what I was getting at when I was saying you can't really compare conferences or even individual games when you have all these opt-outs. My own opinion is I don't think they should be allowed to opt out. That's just my opinion. I just don't think they should be. They haven't up until all of a sudden they are. So I don't think they should be, especially if you're talking about a game that's it just makes it meaningless if you have a bowl game. It just makes the bowl game meaningless if all your players are opting out.
Well, sir, I agree with you. I don't want to see these opt-outs either, but there is no way to make it not allowable. It's a free country, so
well, there was for 100 years.
No, just nobody did it. Nobody thought to do it.
There wasn't a possibility. I mean, you could quit the team.
Exactly. That's what they're doing. That's what all those players are doing. They are quitting the team. They're not going to play anymore with the team. They're done, and they're going to prepare for the NFL draft. So there's no way to penalize them.
That's right. That's true. They're quitters, basically.
Exactly. They're quitting on their
quitting
team.
on their teammates.
Yep.
And their teammates. With all these opt-outs, there's no way you can compare teams or conferences.
Well, we still attempt to do it because depending on the game, some games there is a load of opt-outs. Other games there's just like one guy per team. So you can still make some kind of an estimation. Yeah. So, all right, sir.
Of course you can. You can do what I call a swag. You know what a swag is? SWAG.
Well, I know what swag is, but
it's SWAG is a scientific wild ass guess.
There you go. But that's what we do. That's the best you can do. That's the best that we can do here. Well, I appreciate the call, sir.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty much what my job is here to now I forget what it stands for. It was something wild ass guess. Something wild ass guess. Now I forget what the first letter stood for. All right. We got 3 lines open, or I should say we've got 3 calls coming in, maybe more than that, because we can only take 3 calls at once. So why don't we take these 3 calls and then call it a night and get ready for New Year's Day right here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Michael. Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to everybody in the chat.
Michael, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Excuse me. I got to say, I'm eating poor right now because I kept saying all week in the last couple of weeks and stuff that I thought whoever had the ball last between Georgia and Michigan was going to win the game. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Well, I knew better myself, but I didn't follow my wisdom. I went with a bit of a hunch and just thinking maybe it's Michigan's year.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to ask you, did you think, in your opinion, when you watched the Alabama-Cincinnati game, do you think Alabama gave Cincinnati opportunity to score and they couldn't catch him in? And I got to say, I got to give a ton of credit to Brian Robinson for having it. Take a running game today. And do you think that they was surprised by with Alabama coming out running at first?
Were they surprised? I would think that they were slightly surprised because I don't know that Alabama's run the ball 13 consecutive times this year.
Neither did I. But no, I was going to say, yeah, I give credit and stuff like that. I see, like, there was some throws that Ritter went back and stuff, and I just wonder why. Normally, when he makes those throws today and stuff like that, that he to make those throws, or is it just you gotta give credit to Alabama for swatting it down and stuff like that, or was he just rattled for a split second or something?
Well, you've got to credit Alabama. I don't know that Desmond Ridder played any worse than he typically does. He was just dealing with a completely different deal today.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
That's all I've got for you. Just playing a completely different team with completely different athletes.
And I was going to say, if you was to grade out Stetson Bennett tonight, what would you grade him out at?
What would I grade out Desmond Ridder?
Bennett.
Oh, Stetson Bennett today.
No, Stetson Bennett.
Give him an A-.
That could go with that and stuff. The question is, though, can you have good games in a row like that? And I wonder how much more, what the difference is going to be between for the rematch a week from Monday.
I would expect Georgia to compete much better than they did the first time around.
I was just wondering stuff like that. All right, Mark, I'm going to let you get off here because I know you got some other calls and stuff. Thanks so much. Have a great New Year.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good one. All right, next up, Happy New Year and welcome to the Voice of College Football.
What's going on, Marcus? JT.
JT, what's going on, man? How you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Mark. I think this watching these semifinal matchups, man. I still remember the first one when I first called in after Clemson advanced to the national championship the first year. Deshaun Watson, I forgot who it was that they had beat. But I just wanted to call in because I had some things I kind of wanted to say. So, like, I find it funny how, everybody, like, as soon as a team loses in the semifinals, they didn't deserve to be there. So I go on Twitter, already made a mistake going on Twitter. Ohio State was trending. So Ohio State was trending because a lot of people are saying that Ohio State should have been in because if they weren't in, then the game went that way. And I ended up telling somebody else, like, well, I mean, if they should have been in, why aren't they in? There's a reason why they're not in. And they had deficiencies stopping the run all year. So I mean, even if they played Bama or Georgia, I know we can't assume anything. We going off what it is, but I mean, Alabama and Georgia still would have beaten Ohio State by a comfortable margin. And I was telling people, I was like, at the end of the day, like, Alabama and Georgia are the two best teams in college football. And that's by the team talent composite rankings. Alabama's 1, Georgia's 2, and majority of people's predictions before the season for the national championship was Alabama, Georgia. So the fact that, people think that just because Michigan and Cincinnati weren't really all that competitive means they didn't deserve to be there, I kind of disagree with the statements that people keep saying. It's like, you're like Alabama and Georgia have pretty much been the two best teams in college football. Georgia has been the best team in college football for pretty much the majority of the year. Alabama just of recently. But I just feel like, that's kind of unfair to the teams that get in, not just referring to Michigan and Cincinnati, but I think it's kind of unfair to say a team didn't deserve to get in by how bad they lost in the semifinals.
Well, you're right. We've got a system, and those teams that did not make it, especially this year, did not earn it. Ohio State clearly did not earn a playoff spot. They could have made the playoffs had they beaten Michigan and won the Big Ten championship, but they failed, so they did not earn a playoff spot. It is reasonable to think, because if you're going to cite the team talent rankings, then it's Alabama 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, and Michigan's 15. That obviously those team talent rankings didn't mean anything when Ohio State played Michigan. So they're not the end all be all, but if you are going to go by them, I think it's reasonable to think that Ohio State's the one team in the country that has the ability to play with those two teams.
Yeah, I was just using that as a reference. Like before the season, they were.
Well, I'm using it as a reference now. I'm playing along with you, using it as a reference. So it's reasonable to believe that if there's one team in the country that could play with those two teams, then that's the one team.
I just feel like if Ohio State would have played Georgia, Bama, the game would have been closer, but I still believe that Ohio State probably would have lost by at least 10 to either
Probably.
one. Just because I know Ohio State, and I was telling somebody on Twitter, I was like, I'm not saying Ohio State would get blown out. Like, they would put up points just because of how potent their offense is, and especially with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, they wouldn't have opted out. They would have put up points. It's just that their defense has been unable to stop the run all year, and they've had issues in the secondary. So their defense probably would have gave up points to both Bama and Georgia. But I was telling them, I was like, Cincinnati, for the most part, for the first 3 quarters, they were pretty competitive. Going into the fourth quarter, we all was asking, okay, can Cincinnati keep the game close? Going into the fourth quarter, they did. It was 17-6. Then the next question the majority of us had was, okay, if Cincinnati can keep this game within reach going into the fourth quarter, where they have enough talent to be able to find a way to draw out the W, and they didn't, because like their defense, even though they did give up over 200 yards rushing, their pass defense for the most part did a pretty solid job slowing down Jamison Williams. Their corners played pretty well, and most of Bryce Young's touchdowns, well, one of them he had that big one to Ja'Cory Brooks, but the other 2 came like inside the red zone and whatnot. So I felt like they played pretty good. Michigan, I was kind of disappointed because I was like, feel like they're a little bit comparable to Georgia and kinds of similarities and playing style, but obviously I was wrong, and I picked Michigan to win simply for the fact that I ain't expect Stetson Bennett to have the game of his life tonight. So I don't know. Like, what was your thought process when it came to picking who you had in the Michigan-Georgia game?
Well, I kind of explained this a couple minutes ago, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but basically I gave reasons why I said Georgia was the better team, and I went through the whole analysis. Again, this has been documented 50 zillion times, so I hate to repeat myself over and over, but basically that Georgia's the better team, but I had a hunch that Michigan would win. I thought they had a fighting shot and that they would put it together tonight, and they did not. So I was wrong.
Now, I got 2 more things. So, like, my next thing is, like, when it comes to the SEC bias, like one of the other callers was saying earlier, I don't really think this was, like, predetermined. I don't really think, the committee made the matchup like this. I feel like the committee chose the best 4 teams. And unfortunately, 2 out of the 4 best teams in the nation, unfortunately, it seems like every year seems to always be in the SEC. So I don't really think it's a bias for the SEC. It's just that, that's where the majority of the best teams in college football are. But I don't really, I understand where he was coming from, but at the same time, I just feel like, Alabama, a lot of people didn't even expect Alabama to get in, because majority of people out there didn't expect that Alabama would be able to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Well, that happened. That's how Alabama got in. Then Georgia, of course, they were going to be in. So I don't really understand, the whole SEC bias conspiracy. And I don't understand why so many people are so quick to jump on to the conspiracy just because, majority of SEC teams are always ranked highly in the committee. Like, the majority of the most talented teams in college football, if we're going by, recruiting and all that, majority of them lie in the SEC.
Well, that's the conspiracy, JT. That is the thought. That's why there's a criticism, and I'm not saying it's valid, but there are hints of it, is that if you look at the playoff, and then before the playoff, the BCS championship game, in any possible way in which there was an opportunity for an SEC team to be put into the playoff or into the BCS championship game, it was given to an SEC team, even if another team earned that spot just as much as the SEC team. There has always been given preference to SEC teams. They're just, and to their credit, mostly Alabama, but a few other teams, they've typically taken advantage of that opportunity. So when people say the SEC's won the most national championships since whatever, 2000, they're right. The SEC has taken advantage of being given the opportunity more than other conferences. And I'm not talking about earning it. I'm talking about 2011. Alabama doesn't win a conference championship. They don't win a division championship. Oklahoma State's got the same record as Alabama. Alabama's already lost to LSU. Who does the BCS put into the championship game? LSU and Alabama. Who's going to win the SEC? Who's going to win the national championship when there are two SEC teams playing in the national championship? Duh, an SEC team. It's impossible for them not to win the national championship. 2017, there could have been an Ohio State team placed in the playoff that had better wins, won a conference championship over an Alabama team that did not even win its division. Now, Alabama backed that up by winning 2 games, one against Georgia. But there you go. You had 2 SEC teams placed in the Final Four. My statement is both are at work here. The SEC is the best conference. The SEC has been the best conference for 15 to 20 years. But at the same time, because that's a predisposition that people have before the season even starts, the SEC is given preference in these decisions. We don't have an objective system. If we had an objective system, then that system would determine who makes the playoffs. But we have people determining this. It's the stupidest situation in sports. We have people deciding who makes the playoff. That's the stupidest thing. It's idiotic. Makes no sense that we have 13 people that hold all the authority in college football, and they're the ones that are selecting the teams to make the playoffs, and they are selecting more SEC teams than other conferences.
I feel like we need more variety when it comes to picking who gets in and who's not. Like, maybe we should have, like, you know, a separate committee that's focused on watching games for a specific region, and then we could have like a little computer model in there. Just like, I just feel like we need a little bit more variety other than just, you know, allowing 13 people in suits and ties to pick the 4 best teams. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more variety in there when it comes to deciding who gets in. We need a little bit more of a broader perspective.
Well, the last comment I'll make about it is we don't need more committees. We need less committees, meaning we need 0 committees. We need an objective system that is going to set up a playoff without people's opinions. All right, JT. Well, I appreciate the call, man. You have a good night.
I appreciate you taking my call.
All right, JT. Happy New Year. All right. And our last call of the night goes to...
Oh, hey, Mark. It's Alex from Boone again.
Alex.
Thanks for having me on. Happy New Year.
Thank you for being here. Happy New Year to you.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. You know, in a somber mood today, I wanted Michigan to do right by the Big Ten. I'm happy with our season, but, you know, I really didn't want us to go out like that. There's no question the better team won, but I don't know about you, but I can't really believe the product Michigan put on the field in the first half in particular. I think Gaddis showed his ugly head again with some really questionable calls. It felt like we ran the screen with Edwards to the left motion about 6 times, and it got like a total of 0 yards. The fake Statue of Liberty. You had receivers giving up. Defensive backs going blind. I just wanted to ask you, I know you've answered this question. Do you think you got people saying, like, pointing at this and saying, this is the litmus test. This is the SEC versus the Big Ten, and this is what it looks like. And pointing to Michigan's dominance of Ohio State. I know the SEC is probably a bit more top-heavy, but do you think you could point to this game and say, okay, this is the difference right here?
I think it's the most valid result that we have to date, and therefore it's going to be the most valid result that we're going to have for the entire season, because it's the two best teams playing in those two respective conferences, and they had the motivation of playing for a national championship, and they had the motivation of that nobody was opting out. So you didn't have to deal with all those factors of who's trying, who has incentive, who's missing players, all those things. And is this truly the fifth best team in the SEC playing the fifth best team in the Big Ten? No, we knew that this was one of the two top teams in the SEC playing the best team in the Big Ten this year. So it's more of a valid score than all the other results. But no, we do have Purdue and Tennessee playing a game. We've got tomorrow Kentucky and Arkansas playing, and we've got Iowa and Kentucky playing. So we do have other results to measure these two conferences. It's not about one game. We can't say, well, we know what the value of 28 teams is based on two teams.
Yeah, I agree. You got to point to the record also of Big Ten and SEC. Just one more thing, and I'll let you go. What is your grade for JJ McCarthy? And do you think I rewatched the game and they didn't even start JJ McCarthy when we were down 27-3. Do you think we should have gone earlier to him? And would the game be different if he started? I don't really think it would be, but I'm curious to hear your input.
So, number one, the game would not have been different. Of course, it would have been different. They're two different players, but in terms of a result, would it have mattered? No. Most of Cade McNamara's issues were because not Cade McNamara had some awful game out of nowhere. It was because he was facing a defense that he hadn't faced before, that was dominating the offensive line. It all starts with what's going on up front. And the Georgia defensive line dominated the Michigan offensive line and was blowing up plays left and right. But I thought J.J. McCarthy, he definitely showed his passing skills. He is elite arm talent. And if he develops and continues to improve, and I think it was smart of Jim Harbaugh to give him meaningful snaps in big games against good opponents this year to prepare him for possibly starting next year. So I think J.J. McCarthy's got a bright future, and I think he threw some really good balls in this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to see Cade. Going to be sad because I really like him, but transfer out next year. You have a great night, Mark.
Well, thank you so much for the call. Yes, Happy New Year.
No problem. All right, bye.
All right, folks. It's been a great night here at the Voice of College Football, despite two clunkers of college football playoff times. Two clunkers. And yes, get out the John boy. Yes, J.J. McCarthy threw those passes in garbage time, but all you had to do was look at the ability of the throws. Top-notch five-star talent. There's a reason he's a five-star, and he showed it again tonight. Okay. All right, everyone. We've got bowl games starting at noon tomorrow. We will be all over it. I may post a rant where I'm ranting about 3 bowl games being played among 3 prominent games, 6 quality teams playing at the same time. Idiotic. All right. Don't like that. All right. Appreciate everybody being here, and we'll be back tomorrow night, possibly after the Rose Bowl. We shall see, but definitely late night. But we may come on after the Rose Bowl to talk up Ohio State and Utah, as well as the other games in college football. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button, and you can contribute at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Look at what I forgot to do. I forgot to answer Erica's question, who says, honestly, what's the deal with the poor refs this year? This is a problem across the board and across the conferences. What can be done about it? The one thing that can be done about it is for the conferences to get together and make sure that the standards of refereeing is consistent across the conferences and that they go to workshops and camps together. So, for example, pass interference is interpreted the same, even though it's extremely difficult to call in the moment, that it's at least it's approached the same way across the board in all conferences. That would be my suggestion. Thank you, Erica. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow night.